Hello, this is TelecomTV. My name is Martyn Warwick, and I'm talking with Christian Martin, who is the Senior Director of Engineering at Cisco. Christian, welcome. Very basic question to start with. Why is SDN suddenly flavour of the month?
Well, it is definitely the flavor in the month, and I think there's a few reasons for that. First and foremost, I think we've reached an inflection point, and I know that's a cliche, but we have reached an inflection point where, and we show it in a lot of our material, where the cost of deploying new technology in networking continues to be on some track, but the revenue derived, or the benefit derived, if it's not revenue that you're after, is starting to flatten out. And in order to kind of make sure that we're not spending more money than we're taking in, either we can continue to bend the cost curve down, or we can try to, sort of make the revenue curve go up. And I think we're getting to the point where you really can't bend the cost curve much more under the current regime. And so therefore, a new approach is needed, and our customers, our enterprise customers, people in the industry are interested in trying to find that approach. And SDN promises to do both of those things, allow for new service creation, rapid innovation, while at the same time, reducing the cost. And so I think that has gotten the attention of a lot of our C-level folks in the industry.
Listening to the hype machine bubbling away, you would think that network virtualization and telco virtualization is something new, but it's not. Engineers have been known about it for a long time and can do a great deal of it. And now SDN and NFV have suddenly appeared. What's the difference?
Well, that's a good question. I think in many cases there have been a significant amount of virtual network operations that have been undertaken and have been widely and successfully deployed. One example that immediately comes to mind is something like IP-centrics, or just carrier-based voice over IP, completely virtualized model, being able to provide a virtual-centric service. The programmability aspects were there, obviously. There were software components involved, and so that's been a theme for some time. But the virtualization that we're talking about now in the industry is largely around cloud virtualization and multi-tenancy, and because of the increase in cloud-type services, and because of the scale of cloud-type services, especially for cloud operators. Cloud operators need to be able to rapidly deploy multi-tenant services, and they need to be able to take advantage of both the virtualization capabilities of compute and storage as well as of the network. And so to be able to program the network to link together to that virtual compute and storage, to build private and hybrid type clouds, for example, requires a significant amount of new types of programmability and new methods for programming the network. And I think that's where the interest is really generated, because there's, as all these traditional data centers migrate their data into the cloud, the scale and the pace at which it's growing is phenomenal. It's something we haven't seen before.
Engineers have known about SDN and its capabilities for some time and have been working on it, but the news only seems now to be filtering through to the other C-suite inhabitants, the CIO, the CMO, etc., etc. Why is that?
Well, there's two things I think that have happened. One, for the longest time, even in organizations that network and IT plays a critical role, it's still part of the infrastructure. And so it's sort of, it's opaque and obscured by the fact that most enterprises and most businesses in general really derive no value from the infrastructure that they have. It's no different than the air conditioning or the floors, the restrooms or whatever. And so it gets limited exposure. I would also say, so what's happened is, I should say, the IT budgets, the chief information officer, if you will, increasingly is interested in how to improve operations, how to make the IT infrastructure more line of business based, if you will, because it's becoming more mission critical. The consumerization of technology has created new expectations for how the technology is used. Consumers are bringing ideas and technology into the workplace, for example, driving new potential use cases and ways to use infrastructure, and that gets the attention of a CIO or a CEO. A CIO or a CEO is as affected by the marketing campaigns of a company like Apple as a teenager is in many cases, because they want to be part of it as well. So when the CEO says, why can't I connect my mobile device to my email, then it gets everybody's attention. When the engineers 10 years ago were saying, we have a BlackBerry, I want to get email, or I have a phone that can get email, I'd like to get email, it wasn't that important. So I think part of it is the adoption cycle of people who are perhaps older and they may move a little bit more slowly towards new technology. But once people realize the technology is available, then it becomes of interest. Once it becomes of interest, it's linked back to the line of business argument, and now we have to really start to make some changes. So now at the C level, it's sort of a top-down approach. I've been told, or I've heard, that this new SDN stuff could help us potentially drive new business or more rapidly deploy new applications or save us some money. So once you get that kind of attention, then it moves much more quickly.
How about standardization? The word is that SDN and NFV will be a sort of global standard which everybody will adhere to, and we'll have this wonderful round-the-world system that just works seamlessly. But actually it won't be like that, will it? Because in the past, every time we've seen something that's supposed to be a global standard, it simply didn't work. We didn't have it with television, we haven't had it with so many things in the telco world. So we're not going to get this wonderful vista of everything working perfectly. There are going to be great big ugly lumps in there which are proprietorial systems. What do you make of that, and do you think that's the way it's going to be?
I think it's becoming harder to do that and to effectuate control over an ecosystem or an industry or a portion of an industry that way by just sheer force of will and marketing dollars, for example. I think because of open source, because of virtualization, the technologies that have become available, IT shops are becoming increasingly capable of expanding their traditional field of view. So, if the field of view for an IT shop, if you go back 40 years, there was only one field of view, and it pointed directly at IBM. And then, Microsoft entered the game. The PC industry became more and more prevalent, and the field of view starts to expand. Now it's wide open, both because of mobility, because of the fact that people take what traditionally was done in a physical location now on the road with them. The expectations have changed, the where and how you can access data. And so I think, when you talk about standardization, in order to have that kind of openness and that kind of velocity, I think it's more and more important that you do have standards. In this space, for it to be successful, either we have standards de facto or de jure, and I think de jure standards would be something we'd expect to come out of ITU or something. That is not the process that we're looking for in this space. If we want velocity, the ITU is not the place to go for it. So it has to be a de facto standard. And how does a de facto standard emerge? We've, in some ways at Cisco, attempted to do that with our partners in the Open Daylight Project. So by starting something like the Open Daylight Project, rather than going through the standards bodies themselves, we use the force of the industry. In many ways, it's a democratic process because users of all the different organizations that are part of the Open Daylight Project can sort of vote with either their dollars or with their influence to drive towards a standard, because having a widely diverse set of technologies is not going to help. It'll just distract the industry altogether. So I think the way it happens will be through a more democratic process, just like people use applications the way they do. I mean, it wasn't no telco, for example, got people to use Facebook or YouTube. People did it on their own, so that's the way I think it's going to continue to be.
Now let's move on to talk about Cisco. What is the company's role in SDN and NFV?
I think we play a preeminent role in both SDN and NFV, and I think for several reasons. One, of course, we're a bellwether in the technology space and in the IT space, I would say. And I think that because of that, we have an obligation to our customers to be in a leadership role. We also have an obligation, of course, to our shareholders to be in such a role, because it does impact our business how this new evolution of technology changes the industry. And so because of that, because we have an obligation to both our customers and to our investors, I think that we have to take a leadership role. There's no question that Cisco is a leader in this industry. And I think that Cisco is best positioned because of the breadth and depth of our technology portfolio and of our customer base. We have a lot of customers here that are in the mobile space exclusively, or perhaps are in the wireline data center space. But our customers span the gamut of IT customers. They are enterprise customers, they are small office, home office customers, they are users of technology, they are large enterprises, governments, defense, manufacturing, pick a vertical, and we're involved in it. So as a result of that, we have, using the field of view metaphor again, we have this field of view that's wide, and I think our customers expect us to lead in this space.
One side of the industry is talking about the great generational change that SDN and NFV will bring about, and how it's going to be very, very different from now on. Another group, a smaller one, admittedly, but consisting mainly of the big old companies that are a bit slow to move, say that basically this is nothing new and it's just a rebranding of OSS. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention it that way, Martin. Some people look at SDN as, NMS 2.0 or OSS 2.0. And, frankly, that's part of the industry, or at least those who espouse it or who represent it that way. It's the fault of those people for that representation or that interpretation. I think it's much more than that. I think that in order for the industry to evolve around a new set of technologies, I think that in order for SDN to be successful as a vehicle for change, as a vehicle for market expansion, as a vehicle for technology evolution and for cost reduction, it has to do more than just be a network management interface, juiced up and prettied up in a different way. So, from a network management perspective, we talk about the Internet of Things. It has nothing to do with network management. The Internet of Everything, if it's sensor networks to detect slight changes in weather metrics that potentially can be used for faster tornado detection, that's not a network management thing. That's a way of constructing a new type of ecosystem, a new type of technology system that serves the public good. It has nothing to do with network management. So for those who look at it through that sort of a parochial lens, I think that history will be the judge of that approach. I think that it's much broader and much bigger, and that's probably why it's going to take longer for it to be realized. When you talked about the hype cycle, the hype around commoditization of all network hardware, or the hype around the ability to deploy applications rapidly anywhere, anyhow, anywhy, was very much about network management and perhaps pushing the incumbent vendors aside. And
what about commoditization of hardware?
Well, yeah, I think in terms of commoditization, like any commodity, there has to be an equilibrium price point that's found based on general availability or widespread availability. We have to have a way of trading this technology in an open market to identify it, I think, as a commodity. So to commoditize hardware, I think part of the hardware already is going in that direction. And what we mean by that is that rather than there being individual custom engines, let's call them, being built by every network equipment manufacturer, we have general purpose engines that are available. Will they be fully general purpose in the classical Intel sense? I don't think so. I think that internally, and I think any network equipment manufacturer, I think even Intel would say this, that a custom design engine will outperform a general purpose engine, both in terms of capabilities, because they're custom designed, in terms of cost, and in terms of things like heating or cooling, rather. All these things matter to a system manufacturer. So at the high end, I think that in no time soon will you see any real commoditization. I think in places where we've already kind of taken advantage of things like commodity hardware, you're already starting to see that become virtualized. So one of the ways would be in NFV, in the NFV context. Today we have a firewall as an appliance. It may have some hardware acceleration, but largely it's a bunch of Intel chips. Well, we could virtualize that. But can you virtualize an optical system? Can you virtualize a high-end core router? I don't, or can you commoditize it? I'm not sure that that's possible just yet. Maybe in the future, but it doesn't look like it anytime soon. So I think that just like any company that's involved in high-end industrial manufacturing, I think will take advantage of commodity pieces, but we're an integrator as much as anything else. We have a small portion of our budget is dedicated to building engines, but what we do is integrate the entire system, the software, the hardware, the operations principles and practices. We have to be able to handle the manufacturing, the maintenance components, all these parts. None of this is covered, if you will, by the notion of commoditization in the SDN context. The argument is that we can use open source software, we can run it on hardware that's generally available, and that's all you need to do, and that's not true. So I think that while some areas may be further commoditized, it's going to take much more time to get to the point where a network system is entirely the same thing as, for example, a computer system in a data center, because they're much more specialized in our case.
Christian, Martyn, thank you.
Thank you.